Hi everyone, my name's Kathryn. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's really, really great to be invited. I am currently the head of product at a company called Dext, which makes accounting software. But I've been working in product management for over 5 years in a lot of different companies, marketing companies, at Transport for London, and also more recently at GoHenry. And I'm going to talk to you today about a question that I really think about all the time. Is what I'm doing product management? I think it's one of those disciplines that is quite difficult to define, and especially if you're kind of new to the industry, is not always the easiest question to answer. So can I get a really brief show of hands of who is a product manager? A few. Anyone aspiring to be a product manager? Nice, nice, a few more. Okay, well, if you aren't, then don't worry, there will be something in this talk for you. What I'm going to show you this evening is one of my favourite frameworks for understanding and evaluating where you are in your career, what types of activities you're doing, and how to reflect on whether that's where you want to be spending your time. And I'll give a few examples of how you can apply that in your role as well. Okay. So product, I think, it can be a really lonely discipline. Not just being a product manager, but other roles in product as well. If you work in a cross-functional team, which I'm sure most people do, it's quite likely that you're the only person in your team who carries out your discipline. So you might not be working with anyone who does the same job as you for most of your time. And that makes it quite difficult to validate yourself against others, I think, to see how other people are spending their time and just sense check what you're doing. And think about whether that's the right thing for you. It's also a type of discipline that it has a huge number of definitions across a lot of different companies. There are a lot of people who advertise for product managers, and then you might get there and find out that that's not really what you're expecting at all. You might be working for a company right now that doesn't have a particularly well-developed product practice. So hopefully this will be helpful for you as well. We get called all kinds of things: product owners, project managers, and lots and lots of others, but you kind of get the idea. It can be quite difficult to know if the job that you're taking on is going to match what your expectations are. So here's a sort of starter for 10 as to how to define what PMs do with their time. What do we do all day? You can kind of roughly divide these things into two categories, I think. The first one of those is discovery. That will be things like working with research, doing user interviews, spending time with your customers, working with UX and UI, wireframing and creating workflows, defining roadmaps and supporting on business strategy. The second section is kind of roughly categorized as delivery. That could be writing Jira tickets, working with your engineers to manage releases. It could be working on project management and looking after deadlines and things. All of these things, they kind of add up to a rough picture of a product manager. And you might also spend your time, if you're lucky, working with marketing and managing people as well. But it can be quite difficult to build a picture in your mind of what that looks like day to day. Certainly I find sort of day in the life doesn't necessarily give me the best picture of how people are spending their time over the long term. So I want to show you a framework that's been super useful to me that will help you understand the big picture in terms of what your role is doing. Okay. So this is the framework that we're going to talk about today. It's called the PM Daisy, and it was created by a product manager called Julia Nechaeva. She's now a product director at Twitch. I really recommend checking her out on LinkedIn. She posts a lot of really great content, so if you're interested in this kind of thing, she's a great person to follow. And I first found this framework 4 or 5 years ago when I was working at Transport for London. And this was my second role as a product manager, and I was super excited about it because I was working in the data analytics team. And I thought that I was going to get to work in a really cool, exciting company that had a lot of really big challenges and big problems, but also a lot of data that we could use to tackle that. And I got there, and I was right about the problems, but not necessarily about my ability to solve them, because I became what we kind of think of as a PM without portfolio. So I didn't have a team, I didn't have any dedicated engineers to work with, and all of those opportunities that we identified, we found it really difficult to release things. And I really, really struggled there. I felt a lot of cognitive dissonance about the role that I'd taken on. Like, I had the job title of product manager, but I wasn't really doing anything that I thought remotely resembled product management. So I found this daisy, and this is how it works. It looks a little complicated, but it produces nice visualization, so bear with me. The petals on this side represent the activities that you might do in your role, and the colors represent the level of control you have over that activity. So if you have a dark circle in the middle, it means you're an individual contributor, you're very hands-on. If you have a lighter circle, it means that you lead a team or lead members of a team. This is most likely to apply to you if you lead, for example, a squad or a cross-functional team. And the lightest colour means that you use resources external to your team to get this job done. That could be other people within your company, it could be an outside agency, but you don't really have direct control over that resource. And of course, if you have no colour in that petal, it means that you're not responsible for that area at all. Everybody clear so far? Amazing. Okay, so this is how you can create your own. There's a link, I hope, if we can share the slides around, that people can have access to that. The way you generate your daisy is by filling out quite a simple online questionnaire. What these questions will ask you to do is reflect on the types of activities that you do and the level of control that you have over them. My best advice, if you do decide to go and do this, is to try and be as honest with yourself as you possibly can. Even if you don't like ticking that box that's next to engineering that says, I don't oversee this area. Trust me, it will be better for the long term if you can get a really good, honest picture of where you are right now. Because the thing I found most impactful about this is actually how I've seen mine evolve over the long term. And we're going to have a look at that now, because I first filled it out in May of 2019. This is my daisy from that role at TfL, where I didn't really feel like I was in the right place. You can see there's some really good stuff in there for a junior PM. Obviously, I was in the data analytics team. I indexed quite heavily on data analytics, worked with a lot of interesting reporting, a lot of interesting tooling. And I also had some good segments filled in on research. I got to do some really interesting stuff, going out and speaking with station managers about how they use data products, maybe in an environment where they don't have a laptop all the time. They have operational considerations that they need to make, and they need data to help with that decision making. So that was super interesting. You can also see I've got a segment here for program management. I ended up really over-indexing on that because they were very heavy on things like product requirement documents. A lot of scoping exercises and stakeholder management filled my days. And it was really a bit more waterfall than agile, more waterfall than I would have liked anyway. And then here is the big gaping hole in engineering where I had no resource. So I did this daisy, and this really helped me to understand that I wasn't in the right place and it was okay. But I knew what I needed to change when I went to my next company. So this is just over a year later, in September 2020. This is my daisy from when I was at GoHenry. I was working as a growth product manager. If you don't know GoHenry, it's basically Monzo for kids. It's very cool, it's very cute. And they're a proper product-led company. They have a web app, a mobile app, and everything. And you can see here that I've added in 2 segments on research and UX. GoHenry is a really design-led company, which is fantastic. It was a real growth area for me. I got to work with a lot of very experienced and interesting designers and researchers. I still had a good segment in data analytics, so I was able to have access to the data tools that were super impactful for my job. And I also added in a good relationship with marketing, which is super important for any growth PMs out there. But again, this engineering segment was really not where I liked it to be. The situation I was in at GoHenry is that I had my own team, I had a dedicated engineer to work with, which is obviously brilliant, but the way they'd structured their QA and release process was a little bit difficult. So I didn't have any control over QA and release whatsoever. I was kind of at the whims of other PMs in the company. I had to compete for QA time with them. And it's not necessarily the end of the world if you're a core PM and you're maybe you're used to working with app release cadences and things. But if you're a growth PM, you want to be releasing all the time, doing lots of experimentation. It really wasn't working out for me. So this is one of the things that contributed to me moving on to where I am now. And this is my daisy as head of product. You can see there are some changes. I finally got that tighter control over engineering that I always wanted. I've got my own engineering team now, which is fab. I also still work with wonderful UX and research people, which I'm very lucky to have access to. I have all 3 segments here filled in data analytics. I have to do a lot of my own hands-on data analysis, and I also work with a lot of great data colleagues, and I've added in some segments in people ops as well, and this is an area where I'm super interested in growing and developing more in terms of coaching and management. And I've also got all 3 segments in program management as well. And it doesn't mean I'm spending too much of my time doing waterfall, thank goodness, but it does mean that I get to work on some larger scale kind of cross-company projects, which is super exciting. So, non-product managers. This is a little bit of an example of how you might use this if you're not a product manager. I am not a CRO person, but if you are, this is hopefully a reasonably good approximation of what you'll spend your time doing. So in this example, I've got a CRO person who is an individual contributor in designing their own A/B tests, in copywriting and data analysis, and maybe in disciplines like UX design, which require more specialized knowledge. They'll outsource that to someone else in the company. And they also have a couple of blank segments as well. The thing that I think this is really interesting to do is for thinking about your own personal development. So if you're in this kind of position as an executive, then there are 2 ways that you can go from here in terms of developing with your DAISY. You can either go for horizontal growth, which might mean taking on one of these more specialized disciplines. Maybe you're interested in getting into web analytics and building a bit of breadth into your portfolio. Or you can look at vertical progression, which would mean adding in the middle ring to this DAISY. You might like to try managing a team or leading a project, looking after people who are doing some of these IC roles. And finally, here's an example for a junior data analyst. Again, you can see that we've got a lot of individual contributor segments filled in, as this is a junior level role. This person would be spending a lot of time doing analysis deep dives, data quality work, building dashboards and communicating with stakeholders. They might have external teams supporting them on things like analytics engineering, which are a bit more specialized. And this person happens not to do anything like data science or data platform strategy. But this, again, is a really good area for identifying some of those growth opportunities. So if you are a data analyst who is looking at progression, maybe one of those things that you could look at is filling in a segment in a petal that you don't have yet. Or you could have a think about filling in that middle ring and managing some people who are doing these more day-to-day tasks. Okay, so when to use the DAISY? I find there are kind of 3 points in my time when it's been most helpful to use. When I'm just questioning whether I'm spending my time doing the right things, I find it really helpful to sense check that, to reflect on which activities I'm spending my time on. When you're looking at future job descriptions, it can be really helpful. I know certain things to look for in job descriptions now, which I wouldn't have been aware of before, and it also helps me generate questions for interviewers. I always ask if I'm going to get dedicated resource now. Super, super important. And then if you're a manager, to help identify areas of development for yourself and your team. And just really quickly on creating these frameworks, I really like the visualization. I think it gives you a really good kind of instant picture and instant overview of how you're spending your time. If you're not a PM, then obviously the questions on the Google form will not match what you've done, but it is quite straightforward to, what I did was I just listed out all of the topics I wanted to cover and did like a one-to-one mapping between these things and the questions. And then I was able to create the visualization. So if you like, you can do that. If you have some creative skills or some artistic skills, then you could try and draw it out, but I haven't subjected you guys to that this evening for good reason. And then finally, just a quick reminder that there's no right way for your role to look. There's so many different right ways to work in product. You get to decide how your role should look. What's right for one person is not necessarily right for everyone. If you're very junior, as we've seen, you might have individual contributor roles in a lot of spaces. If you're a chief product officer, you might be covering a much broader area of topics, but with much lighter control. So just to bear in mind that it's all about seeing how that progression will take you through your career and helping you decide what your next steps are. Thank you so much. I do have a QR code. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, Um, you can find me on Substack if you like. I write about human skills of product management and emotional intelligence for PMs. So yeah, feel free to look me up and happy to answer any questions.